guys, welcome to Fantasy MVP. My name's Adam. I'm going to be your fantasy hockey analyst. I'm going to help you out this year through the NHL fantasy season. Give you the ins and outs. Got a few different categories to go over with ahead of time. We're going to have something called the staples, which I'll break down all the guys that should be targeted in all formats. Doesn't matter, these guys will carry your team no matter what. I've got also a category called pass it on the left-hand side. These are guys not necessarily that aren't worth taking in your league, but maybe overvalued, and I would at least try to really, use your own discretion about how you're going to be drafting these guys in your leagues. The last one I'm going to be running you guys through is called sleepers and steals. Sleepers is one category, steals is another. Put them together. Sleepers are guys that usually won't be targeted in too many leagues that could provide a lot of upside. Steals are guys, they could be in the second round. Doesn't matter. If there's good value and he's getting drafted way behind where he should be, I'm going to point that out for you. Alright, so that gives you a bit of an overview. Let's get started. I strongly believe that Tuukka Rask will break the trend this year of goalies of the recent past that let down fantasy owners. I think guys like Carey Price and Steve Mason have put enough doubt in the minds of fantasy owners that this top 5 goalie potential and production can be had with a mid-round value. I'm talking 5th or 6th round, which is great value for a guy like that. One thing you got to look at is a sub-2 goals against average and a save percentage over .930. Now that should be enough to convince any fantasy owner of goalie greatness. The other sure bet on this team is Zdeno Chara. This guy has been the model of consistency over the last bunch of seasons. He's been averaging around a +18 per season, which is a fantastic rating to go along with more than half a point a game. So basically what you're relying on is tons of power play time and power play minutes. You're looking at the defensive centerpiece of the Boston Bruins, who should be competing for the Cup. You're looking at maybe about 50 points and a good maybe +15 to +20 rating on the year. Marc Savard is probably the biggest question mark on the Bruins this season. We've all seen before the lasting effects of getting Matt cooked, and there's 2 real obstacles with a player coming back from concussions. First thing is going to be avoiding the reoccurring physical effects of getting a bruise to the brain. The second is the ability of the player to be able to drown out the footsteps he's going to be hearing every time he's approaching the line of fire. I would avoid a guy who's getting drafted in maybe the end of the 6th round. This guy's ceiling this year is going to be somewhere in the 50 to 60 point range. Last year, there was a lot of name power on the Bruins on their forwards. It looked real good. Not a single player surpassed 52 points. And I'm feeling that it's going to be something similar to that this year again. So for a guy who's playing a position like center where there's tons of depth in this league, I wouldn't take him in the top 60. But if you dropped a few rounds, people got hesitant, he's a really good value around the 100th pick. There's only one real sleeper this year on the Bruins to watch, and that's Tyler Seguin. If this guy can stick on the roster and ends up getting bumped to the wing because of the depth that Boston has at center, this guy's going to have dual position eligibility at center and right wing, and is a guy that's worth, because of his pedigree of being taken 2nd overall, as a real good sleeper in this league. The other guy that you want to keep an eye on is going to be David Krejci. And this guy has fallen off the radar a little bit and could have a bounce back year challenging for first-line center duties, and is a great pick going after the 10th round. The Sabres have 2 guys this year you're going to want to watch and keep on your fantasy radar in all formats. One of them much higher regarded than the other. That's going to be Ryan Miller. This guy is going to be the consensus #1 goalie overall and will carry your fantasy squad in all goalie stats and will be able to at least offset if you have a weaker second goalie, allowing you to draft a lot better value on your offensive production. Thing to watch with him is that he's on 5 years in a row producing top 20, top 30 numbers. His only off year in that time was in 2008, 2009, where he missed a few games due to injury and still managed to put up top 50 production. The other guy you're going to want to pay attention to is going to be Derek Roy. This guy is inconsistent, not spectacular, but will give you good value in the 6th, 7th, possibly even the 8th round, giving you between 65 to 70 points and a pretty decent plus-minus. Tyler Myers is a guy who's going to put up decent fantasy numbers this year, but personally I would try to avoid him because I don't think you're going to get the value at where you're going to be drafting him. He's a guy that, probably expectations are a little too high based on the way that some young defensemen have been performing in the last couple of years, mainly a guy like Drew Doughty. But with a guy like Tyler Myers, I don't see anything to show me that he's going to have, he's not going to have a drop-off, but I also don't think he's going to have much of an increase. So personally, I'm going to try and stay away from him. The next guy that I would try to avoid is Tim Connolly. He's in a contract year, and that's going to tempt a lot of guys, especially around the 11th round, to draft him. But I going from the last couple of years, keep thinking to myself, he's got point per game potential, but I'm not going to put my faith into him because I fully believe that he's going to end up sitting at every bump and bruise that he gets to try not to scare off the free agent suitors in the offseason. Third guy I'm going to avoid is going to be Drew Stafford. Now he's a guy that everybody touts as a real good prospect, a guy to break out, maybe carry the offense, get into first or second line duties with some power play time. I've been let down the last couple of years, and I think there's too much good youth in Buffalo to rely on Stafford. I think, probably 35, 40 points is going to be his ceiling again. That's going to disappoint a lot of guys that draft him. Jason Pominville is a guy who's going to be a great bargain this year. He's going about 5 rounds later than Derek Roy, and should put up the same, if not better, numbers. I'd say 65 to 70 points is a lot, and this guy carries 80-plus point potential, plus coming off the wing instead of just center. The other guy I'm going to watch, this is my sleeper of the year, is going to be Tyler Ennis. This guy came in last year, put up 9 points in 10 games at the end of the season, and followed that up in the playoffs, in the grind, put up 4 points in 6 games on a team that was getting bumped in the first round. I look for him to have a great year this year. He's penciled in at the third line, but he's only got a couple of veterans in front of him, mainly Mike Greer and Johan Heck, who are going to be his obstacles, and these are guys that are going to be easily bumped. I think another guy to watch also is going to be Tim Connolly. This guy gets traded or stumbles or gets injured, anything like that, Tyler Ennis is going to jump right in and probably be the best sleeper this season. Mike Camilleri is a guy coming off the wing who's going to put up great numbers also coming out of the 5th round. He's a guy that is a real good bet to get about 30 goals and close to a point per game production, especially if he stays healthy. And last year, just look at the way that he dominated the power play and put up tons of points. This guy took over the entire Montreal Canadiens team and carried them through their playoff run. Another guy to keep your eye on this year is going to be Thomas Plekanec. This is a guy that some people might have thought last year he put up the numbers that he did because he had a little more opportunity than he should usually be getting, and because he was in a contract year. But I'd say he's a pretty safe bet to get somewhere around the same production as last year, but I don't see too much more coming out of this guy. The last of the 2 remaining Kostitsyn brothers still in Montreal is a guy I would try to avoid at all costs. He's going somewhere around the 8th round, and personally, I just think he's straight lazy. I would not put my stocks in this guy. He's like the Montreal version of what Alex Ponikarovsky was for a lot of years. Great tools, but you just can't teach desire. The next guy I would try to avoid is going to be Andrei Markov. Now, I've heard it before, and I've seen plenty of managers do it in the past. They draft a guy that's injured, they put him on the IR, fill a waiver spot, they wait it out, figuring this guy's going to come back and give him a great boost later in the season in the playoff run. The only thing is you can never rely on them coming back at full strength and giving you proper production. More times than not, they come back and they're a liability. So personally, in this era, now there's tons of young defensemen coming up, lots of skill, lots of depth. I would pass on a guy like that. Okay, the closest thing the Habs have this year to a sleeper is going to be PK Subban. He got a lot of exposure last year, got 18 points in 14 playoff games, really played well defensively, and this year with the injury to Andrei Markov, I think he's an easy pencil in as a top 4 defenseman in Montreal. The only thing is that he's about a 14th round value the way he's been ranked, and in a lot of leagues he's going to go around there. But you got the Habs faithful who are all over this guy and will be reaching to draft him somewhere around the 10th round, which is not a bad bargain even then, because that's where I would slot him in for myself. This year, he's going to be the version of Tyler Myers, which we all saw last year, and 2 years ago the same thing with Drew Doughty. Very reliable pick. The other guy I would be keeping an eye on is going to be Scott Gomez. Now, around the 14th, 15th round where he's been going, with a lot of people avoiding him too, that's a real bargain for 70 points. He's not a breakout candidate at all. He's not going to be spectacular. He's not a gem in the rough, but he is going to be a real good bet for consistency. This year, Jason Spezza can be had in the late 2nd round, early 3rd round, which I think is going to be great value. He's a guy who's going to put up every single season about a point per game, and is a great bet to hit 30 goals and about 50 assists, which going in the early 3rd round is a really good value. Next guy I keep an eye on as a staple is going to be Daniel Alfredsson. Coming from the wing, it's a great position eligibility to have, and can probably easily get you about 70 to 75 points. Now there is some risk because the guy is turning 38 this year that he could drop about 10 points, could have an injury, so 60 to 65 points is not out of the realm of possibility, but I'd say he's a safe bet to roll the dice on. The third staple that I'll be watching this year is going to be Sergei Gonchar. Now with the move to Ottawa, He's got a couple other defensemen around him with offensive upside, so his ice time during the games will be able to be limited by a bit. And I would say he's a sure bet to stay healthy and play about 75 games and get his usual 50 to 60 points. It's one of 2 to 3 defensemen in the league that has that kind of upside, so I would jump on him where he's been going. Alexei Kovalev is a guy I'm going to avoid at all costs this year. He's shown nothing other than to be in retirement mode after getting that last contract that he got and not having to move too far to do it. The other guys I would avoid from Ottawa is going to be the goalies. Now, they're probably going to give Pascal Leclerc every opportunity to be the starting goalie because of the amount of money that he's making. Personally, I think Brian Elliott's a better bet to be the starter. Has a good chance to come 20, 30 games into the season and steal the role, so I would wait 6 to 7 rounds, take him as a good backup bet. One biggest sleeper this year on the Ottawa Senators. Get a pen, write it down, Erik Karlsson, and I'll underline it 3 times. This guy is a solid offensive defenseman. Last year, got sent down, showed mental toughness, came back, and contributed pretty well in limited time. Almost half a point per game over the whole season. Enter the playoffs, point per game, ignore the -4 because the Senators got walked all over in that first round. Second guy I'm going to keep my eye on is going to be Nick Foligno this year. Nick Foligno hasn't shown anything spectacular, disappeared in the playoffs last year, but I would say that his defensive abilities and the fact that in the playoff time averaged over 17 minutes a game is a solid bet playing on the second line with Mike Fisher to net possibly even a career high around 50 points this year, maintaining some power play time and about a +10 average. I would say that's a pretty good pick, seeing that he's been going undrafted in most leagues. For the first time in recent history, the Leafs have more than one fantasy notable this year. First one I'll talk about is Captain Dion Phaneuf, who came, he saw, and he conquered the DJing duties in the dressing room. With that, he completely ousted the regime from the Muskoka 5 that was there before him. This year, a rejuvenated and uplifted attitude from Phaneuf is going to net him a solid plus-minus, penalty minutes, first-line power play duties, and probably get back to that 50 to 60 point potential where he was. So great value. He's been going maybe 4th, 5th, 6th round, somewhere in there. Wouldn't reach too far for a defenseman, but great guy to look at. Next guy on the up with Phaneuf is going to be Caberlet. I think he's far enough removed from the Cam Janssen hit to be able to move forwards, and he's got a hell of a chip on his shoulder after trying to be traded the entire offseason, and this has been going back 2 or 3 years. So keep your eye on Caberlet this year to redeem himself in the fantasy world. The new guy that we got to talk about this year, which got a little bit overlooked last year in Fantasyland, is going to be Phil Kessel. I know the name's been out there and floated around. He's nobody new, but you know what? This year, he's got also a chip on his shoulder like Caberlet. He's got all he's been hearing his entire time with the Leafs so far has been about the overpaying that Burke did in order to acquire him. So he's got a lot to prove right now. I'd say 40 goals is not a stretch. They've got a solid D behind him, and look for Tyler Bozak to emerge as a solid option at center for him. On a young up-and-coming team like the Leafs, there's not too much risk, but the closest thing I can find somebody I would pass up on but watch throughout the season is going to be the goaltending situation. The Leafs have 2 solid goalies, one in Jonas Gustafsson, the other J.S. Giguère, but I can't see anything other than a split of time until later on in the season when Burke can maybe move Giguère, and both goalies will be real good candidates to carry fantasy teams to championships. Second thing I'm going to try and avoid is going to be the temptation to reach for a guy like Nikolai Kulemin in a breakout year. Now, I think he's got too much of a defensive responsibility. I'd say probably he's going to cap out around 40-45 points, and it's going to be a similar situation with a young guy like Nazem Kadri. Don't reach. He's a year or 2 away. Both of these guys are great defensive players, good fun to watch. I would not put them in a fantasy lineup. Now, the Leafs are in a real good position to provide tons of sleepers and steals this year. It's like the perfect storm. First guy I'll be watching, and I can't understand why he's going undrafted, is going to be Tyler Bozak. And he's going to get even more opportunity this year to build on that. Keep an eye on him. I mean, I would be reaching personally to the 9th or 10th round, but I know he can be had about 6 rounds later. Second guy to keep an eye on is going to be Carl Gunnarsson. Francois Beauchemin is a guy that has a good chance to put up good numbers this year and get moved. And if he does, that leaves the door wide open for Gunnarsson to move in, hit 30 to 40 points, a good plus-minus, and second power play duties.